All right, so wow. Welcome to Grandmother Stones of Megalithic Europe, and this is primarily a talk about the female statue-menhirs, as they're known technically in archaeology, different names for them in different languages, which is a pattern. And it took many decades for me to uncover the full extent of this pattern. It's female iconography, and there is some male iconography, so I'm not trying to say that it's entirely female, but there's a definitely strong, overwhelming pattern of female iconography in the Neolithic, late Neolithic societies of Western Europe primarily. And so we're going to look at that pattern, starting with the oldest examples that I know of. And this Dame de Douai is from the Celtic-speaking region of France. This was way before Celts, of course, up there in northwestern France. And you can't really call her a megalith. She's a stone statue, but she was part of a stone circle with standing stones that was near enough to the coast that as the waters rose, and this is something that's legendary both in Bretagne and Wales about the sunken lands, the part of the stone circle went underwater. Uh-oh, somebody's got no sound. Check on, make sure that you're using under audio options, dial in or headset mic according to whatever you're using. And if other people have no sound, then please let me know. Okay. Anyhow, this is a stone which has natural formations. This sort of vulva-like shape here is part of the actual original shape of the stone, which they then carved with very prominent breasts. And this is not tall. You can see from the size of the stone blocks, the masonry in the background here. Anyhow, so this, it's interesting, and they have dated her to 4500 BCE, which is the very oldest horizon of the megalithic civilization in Western Europe. And they were able to do this radiocarbon dating from coals, from burnt offerings that were around and under the stone. And because they were under it, then that's pretty definitive that it will date the actual stone. And so, dating organic materials through radiocarbon is a very important way of determining age in archaeology. All right, so now this also is not a megalith, but it's the archetypical form that we're going to see in many different ways, different countries over a period of several thousand years. And this one, also in Bretagne, you've got breasts and this U shape, almost as if it's the chalice of the womb, just there in the belly. We're going to see that a little bit later on. And then also you could call this a co-gendered figure because it has this pillar head, which some people would describe as phallic. And so the inclusion of masculine within the form of the feminine, which is pretty accurate to actually human fetal development and basic biology. The XX and then the XY being derivative from that. All right, here's another example with a pillar head, and this wooden part is the part that was destroyed. It looks like it was broken, but you can see it's a breasted figure from this, and they are putting this necklace in here. There is kind of an interesting loop here. I don't know. We don't know what was the totality. Anyway, this is from Ceremonial, also in Bretagne. And these are all very, very old and not of megalithic size. They're just stone sculptures. And so we're going to see a lot of necklaces. Here I'm throwing in, while we're in Bretagne, an example of one of the greenstone necklaces that have been found in dolmens, the collective burial monuments and funerary sanctuaries, ancestral sanctuaries, I think probably is a better word, in various parts of Western Europe. And so now we're going to move to the opposite corner of France, over down into Provence. And these still were not in megalithic size yet. The earliest statues from these societies these are only a couple feet tall, if that. And limestone images with very prominent decorated hair, long-haired figures with what I'm going to be calling the ancestor face, the brow, nose, eyes. Sometimes the eyes aren't even really shown. But these are not individualities. They are ancestral beings and presences. And so there's quite a lot of these. And these are also at the older end. And I've seen dating for these around 3600 BCE, which is older than most of what else we're going to be looking at. Here again, this chevron pattern hair, lozenge pattern hair, and the ancestor face. And so there's quite a lot of these in southeastern France, and they're also part of a pattern that we can see coming out of southern Spain. We're going to see examples later on from Portugal. And so these are basically stelas, and I think they do have to do with ancestral mothers. I mean, there doesn't seem to be controversial that these long-haired beings represent females. Rocher des Dômes, we're back in Provence, and this is kind of like a little bit different, kind of a rounded head, and then we have this star shape, or this, what is it, eightfold figure. They both do the same thing, same kind of face, mouthless. They say that the dead have no mouth. There's different proverbs in different parts of the world to that effect, and we see that again here. This is a small megalith from Cabeça da Mina in Portugal, and now we're going to look at the Portuguese standing stones, which are among the oldest. And what we're looking at here is a photo of one of the stone circles there, which have many menhirs, this means standing stone, that are in of female form. And so this is at Almendres, so we'll start there. It took a long time for people to notice, outside of the region at least, that there were faces on these stones. And not all of them have human forms, but a lot of them do. And so you have large noses, eyes, no mouth, and then gigantic crescent-shaped lunula. As we're going to see, there are examples of these that have been found, actual necklaces. All right, so this is one of the rare photos I was able to get of these, and they're kind of hard. Oh, here's an actual picture of the lunulas, and these are in limestone that were excavated from the late 4th and early 3rd millennium BCE around Lisbon. And so you can see some of the same patterning that we're going to, especially these kinds of patterns that are from the Paleolithic and into the Neolithic. But these were actually worn ornaments. And here we're seeing two of the female forms where you've got these wide-nosed people, women, with breasts, and also with necklaces. And sometimes the pendant is over the breasts, and sometimes it's under them. Also a belt. Sometimes you'll see what appear to be stones or gems suspended from the belt. This one has a knife hanging from the belt, which is a long-standing pattern of women carrying knives. This may be a vulva. And on the actual stones, it's very difficult to see. So in a way, it's helpful to have these photos, drawings, although photos would be a lot more powerful in impact. And this one, you can see how abstract they are. Eyes, necklace, belt, a lot of other little zigzag, maybe serpent symbolism, and others. Now, these begin to show us a symbol that is referred to as the crook, and there's a lot of them on the standing stones. And some of the archaeologists have tried to say that if there's breasts in a necklace, it's a female, but if there's a crook, then it's a male. The problem is we have crooks with breasts, and so there is definitely an overlap going on there that's not always recognized. And these crooks also turn up in the archaeology. We actually see pieces of slate or schist that have been engraved with some of the same patterns we're seeing in the lunulas. These have been found in dolmen burials, and so they are obviously some kind of ceremonial objects. Here again we've got the breasts, we have the crook, there's these little dotted patterns, maybe ornaments, and the face. What we're looking at here is the basic outlay, the shape from the air of this standing, circle is, we're using the word circle for these stones very loosely. As you can see, elliptical is a little more accurate, and they're really kind of a constellation of them. And so here's the crooks again appearing on pottery in some Portuguese dolmens. And we also see maybe what represents that same ancestor face, that brow and nose motif. also, this is from the dolmens as well. Both in Spain and Portugal, they have what they usually refer to as plaque idols. And so we have these large-eyed figures, and here again, ancestor face, brow, nose, eyes. Eyes that really look like sun and moon, kind of like stars. And the same tattoo marks going across the face on both of these that we're going to see extensively in the French megaliths, and it also turns up in bone idols from Spain, as well as we've got our zigzag patterning. These aren't large, not more than a foot tall in most cases. And what you can see was made to be hung or worn. But that's just by way of comparison. If someone is coming through as audio, doing stuff, and so if you could just make sure to either turn the sound down on your computer, or if you're using the phone, hit *5, I think it is, to mute yourself. All right, this is an overview of the 3 known stone circles in south-central Portugal in this megalithic period. And again, not really circles, more ovals or ellipses. So this was Almendres that we just looked at. And next we're going to be looking at Portela de Mogos, and then finally Valle Maria do Meio. And at Almendres in particular, some of the largest and most impressive stones are standing in the west. And you can see there's kind of an entrance here in the east, so that you would be facing those as you came into the sanctuary. The western end is also emphasized in Mogos and Maria do Meio. So here is Mogos, and you can see very similar in style, but there's a little bit difference in the lunula, which is very sharply pointed. I mean, the crescent is at a stronger angle. But you have these faces, and my hypothesis, based on the overall pattern of these megalithic statue-menhirs, is that these necklaces are gendered female. Here's examples of them, although we have one here with no breasts, so it still has the necklace, but it does seem to be very prominent in the female figures. And again, there's a little belted area being indicated with zigzags here and with round dots there. And so you can see how many of these have been carved in light relief, I think, as ancestral beings and presences. These both have a triangle suspended below the crescent, and this one has breasts under the crescent and also apparently breasts within it, unless those are supposed to be eyes or something else. Here again, the crescents, and this looks like it has the breasts within it as well. Very, very lightly incised, sometimes with zigzags or serpents. And here's a photo. This is the only photo I have from Mogos. And you get a better idea of the impression of them and how heavily weathered and many millennia of lichen growth on them, so that they don't really stand out as much as they would have when they were originally created. And also at Mogos, you see a difference. Many of the necklaces are not so much a lunar shape, and they are almost more bolt-like or U-shaped. This is the same photo and then a drawing of the same image. And here you can see much more clearly one of the lower crescents, and then the upper one crescent, the crook. The upper crook barely shows up at all to the naked eye. So think about what these would have looked like in the moonlight, just as a very strong, powerful landscape presence. Here again with the crooks, also at Mogos. Barely has a face on this one, just the necklace and the belt. Oh yeah, Chris is talking about the pillars at Göbekli Tepe. Mm-hmm. Okay, now this one is again small. It's not megalithic, but we have the same ancestor face going on, and we also have a bulge, which most archaeologists take this as a pregnant woman. Spain. All right, I'm going to shift now to south-central France, and they're one of the most dramatic collections of statue-menhirs in Europe. Comes from this site, this set of sites, this region. in Tarn and Aveyron and areas to the northern part of Languedoc and then north from there. So this one is one of the most impressive, and she really is archetypical for this entire cultural pattern that I'm talking about. Multiple ropes of necklaces, breasts, hands to the center of the body, a belt, sometimes legs, sometimes not, and the face, very simple dots, the nose almost looking like a megalith standing in a field here, a pillar type of nose, and then there's these horizontal lines, which I think are tattoos. There's a lot of figures from Spain in particular that have these markings. They appear on a lot of the statue-menhirs. Okay, no sound. All right, we're going to have to just, hold on, I'm going to put it like all right, hopefully we're going to have sound again here. And the background noise I can't control. That is other people who are calling in by phone and have not muted their phones. So please, it's either *5 or #5 or 5 #. I'm not sure which, but do try to mute yourself. I'm talking as loud as I can, and I know the audio is not real strong on this. Okay. Okay, I'm getting that some people are hearing audio, and other people who are using phone are not getting audio. I'm just going to have to wait until people let me know if the sound is back. Okay, you have audio. All right, so we're going to continue now. Anyway, as I was saying, the Lady of Saint-Sernin is one of the really classic icons of the late Neolithic. And so here she is. This is a back view of her, and we can see that there's signs of a cloak coming down the sides of the body, and in the back we see that she has a cloak that's pulled over her, thrown over her shoulders to her back, and it looks like she's actually fastened the cloak back. And also the belt goes all the way around the body, holding the cloak into the body. So by comparison, here's something interesting. This is not something that I think is historically related. Oops, where'd it go? This is thousands of years later, way off over in Turkey, but the same kind of form as we've seen with the Lady of Saint-Sernin, the same shape, and you have also head, necklaces, I don't know if these are supposed to be breasts or not, and a belt, also with the cloak thrown over her back. So I just put this in as a comparison. I'm not suggesting that there's some endurance of that symbol. Also, another comparison, which is much more direct, in my view, is this Ethiopian megalith. And they, in northeastern Africa, have very similar representation of a woman with multiple ropes of necklaces, breasts, hands to the center of the body, belt, and the legs aren't shown, but the feet are shown. And you can see there's a lot of other rich symbolism going on in these South Ethiopian megaliths. So, this is interesting because, I've been studying this since the 70s, and when I first found this was the first female statue-menhir I came across. And I located a book by Crawford on the eye goddess that had these Sidamo megaliths in it. And I was just struck so much by the similarity. Archaeologists, when they were trying to figure out what's the origin of these Western European megalithic civilizations, they automatically thought of Western Asia, the so-called Middle East. And, all civilization was supposed to have originated from there, according to the early 20th century way of thinking in white academia. And so, they were kind of flummoxed when the radiocarbon dating started coming through and telling them, no, the Western European megaliths are older than the classic civilizations of the Levant, of Palestine, Israel, and Syria, and so forth. They're older. And so they were looking pretty much everywhere except for Africa. And so what I want to know is whether or not this African pattern might have influenced the European. Currently, academic thinking is trying to still claim that these monoliths are medieval in Ethiopia. And I just really can't see that. I think there's a long development. You can see a lot of stylistic progressions in Ethiopian megalithic art. And so I'm really, really skeptical of that. I think these are a lot older. How much older, I really don't know. So back to the basic archetype. Here's another one that you can see here, the line of the ground where this was standing out on the landscape. And you have, again, the same kind of face we saw at Aveyron, eyes, nose, and tattoos, or some people want to say these are cat whiskers. And you have the necklace and the breasts and the belt and the legs, very similar to all of that. Okay, another one, actually two, where you've still got that. This is a symbolism that just comes through over and over again. And as you can see, what they've done is they've shaped these stones and then done very light relief on them. They are not in the round statues. This one's holding an object. I'm going to look at this pendant object in a little while, and she also has the tattoos on her face. This one has no face at all. I mean, it's just kind of rounded off there. And this one, the head has dropped down into the shoulders, into the body, very close to the breast. You still have the multiple necklaces hanging there. And so these are, originally they're out on the landscape. They're not part of a structure. They're not part of a tomb. There's no signs that they were connected in any way with burial customs. They seem to be ancestral beings. Maybe some people say that they were clan markers for particular communities. That's kind of a, more of a political explanation for them that really does not take into the fact of veneration, that these are clearly sacred images in their own right. And then this one is really interesting. This woman gave me this photo. I was just blown away when I saw it, because here is the same archetype in a different medium. In this case, being cut out of the living rock of limestone south of Paris. So we have eyes, the straight nose, the tattoos, the multiple necklaces, just like we have on the statue-menhirs, but this is inside a cave sanctuary. So that's important. I think very important. And then here's two other examples which either have a cloak or, here it's pretty clear that it's probably a hood. Could be a braid of hair down the back. And if it is a hood, then we have a continuity here that's thousands of years old for the types of hoods that you see in medieval Europe. And then some smaller ones. I think these are still South Central France as well, still with the tattoos, Ancestor-Face, but they have these pendants, or these what they call the Y pendant in French archaeology, suspended. This is two pictures of the same piece, and you can see how much a photo, they look so different. You can really see the pendant quite clearly here. I mean, it could be a ceremonial object of some other kind, but this is why I'm saying pendant, is that compare the shape of this with this staghorn pendant that was actually excavated from this time horizon archaeologically. Okay, and it looks like it's hanging from a loop. And so an amulet could have been a ceremonial staff as well, and you see it over and over again. Hanging from a separate loop is what I would say there. Although it could be just kind of a Y-shaped staff of some type. here again, the heads are descended into the chest, and they are skulls. And so, really deep eye sockets on that one. This is really, to me, definitive that these are ancestral beings. And so, we have to just stop and think about what a culture was about, that they are making stone monuments to ancestors. This is pretty well known on a more global level. And, that there's a very strong, this Y pendant is associated only with the female figures with the multiple necklaces. So there's a really strong focus on ancestral women, which to me suggests a matrilineal society where kinship is defined in the mother lines. Here's one where the head has been struck off, but we still have necklace, hands, and breasts. Hands to the breasts, which is what we see in the many iconic female figurines from all over the world. It's a really basic human gesture of reverence for the Divine Mother, ancestral women. And this one, here's a reconstruction of what they think it might have looked like before somebody whacked at it and took the area right at the breasts. You have this targeting at female parts in the process of religious supersession by Christianity or whatever other religion in many cases, but also just a basic hostileness to icons of female power. The face is barely able to be made out. It looks as if it might have been tattoos here across. And some of them only have iconography of necklace for female or the dagger, a Neolithic type of stone dagger for the male. There's no face. There's no other human attributes. They really kind of boiled it down here. And I was mentioning before that there are male megaliths from this region, and so I'm going to show you one of them here. I'm really concentrating on female iconography in this show, but I'm not trying to claim there were no males. The male figures are important in this particular assortment because they are the basis of dating for these. There's no radiocarbon dating for stone. And so, until they get their thermoluminescence or whatever else really together, we're left with looking at other clues. Now, the reason I'm saying the dating is because he's got a bow and arrow, and he has a flint knife of a Neolithic type. This is not a Bronze Age knife. And so they have a loop around it, around the dagger, at the handle. It's not part of the flint. It's attached to the flint. And it's being worn on a baldric across the chest. So this is definitive for male figures in this iconography. What came up in reading about this is the archaeologists were saying that there were sex changes being done on some of the male figures. And their basis for saying this was that here you see breast and necklace, kind of lightly incised there. This baldric was there originally. It could not be removed. And here you see the knife. The baldric here is there before the breast is incised. So the breasts are clearly added over on top of this original masculine figure. And so I was a little skeptical about this when I first saw it. It's because, the main pattern that I've seen is male supersession over female iconography. And so, But, there are quite a few examples, and this is not one of them necessarily. Oh, here's the baldric again. No, that's the arm. I don't have these in the right order. Here's another one, where you've got an attempt to erase the dagger, but you still see the indentation of that handle, and then some very crudely incised necklace put over it. I'm a little bit out of it because I had forgotten about this webcast, and I'm just really jumped in both feet. All right, so let me go back to that other one so you can get another look at it. I don't know why I have this in this sequence with the ones that look like they had shifted from male to female. But here's again that sunken head into the shoulders and chest area. Very mysterious looking beings, these sunken faces. Some more artistic than others. And they even seem like they kind of fall apart after a while. I mean, they're just become, some are cruder than others, and maybe I can't assume that the cruder ones are later, although that's a pattern I've often seen in other archaeological sequences. But like, for example, this one, the breasts have become something very close to chipmunk cheeks. They're above the necklace, which is not original. Here they've got them below, and the hands are still reaching over to gesture toward the breast. There's also this one outlier from southwestern France, and this is, again, not a statue-menhir, but it's really just a block of stone that's been carved in a style that's rather different than the other ones we've been seeing. We might compare this a little bit to the very first one I showed you, but it really resembles more than anything the Lipinski-Vir stone sculptures in Serbia, which are several thousand years older than this, maybe as much as 3,000 or 4,000 years older than this. But you've got, the reason I compare that is you have this kind of fish mouth on the figure, and these are both photos of the same image. Breasts, and then the hands, these three-fingered hands clasping the belly, also very similar to Lipinski-Vir, which, however, features a very prominent vulva at the center. So just by way of comparison. Another group of statue-menhirs, which are both male and female, come from Gard region, which is in southeastern France. And so we've got an example here of ancestor face, breasts, necklace, hands to the center, giant block of stone. And then this one also has both breasts and the crook. And so here we're seeing the crook appearing also in southern France, just as we've seen it out of Spain and Portugal. And again, the archaeological claim is the crook is a masculine attribute, necklace female, crook male, but in fact here we see a female figure with it. And there are others which have no breasts, no gendering other than the fact that they're holding the crook. Here's an example of one that is assumed to be a masculine figure because crook, no breasts. Other ones have crook with knife, and so, I would think that would secure as a masculine form. This one is ambiguous. Here's one with breasts, and it's not clear if that's a crook or not. It looks like it is one. Okay, so moving now to the northeastern corner of France. Hypogeum is a Greek word that means under earth, and it refers to rock-cut underground sanctuaries, the most famous ones being in Malta. And most people that study these things nowadays are familiar with those, but these are very unpublicized relative to Malta, and they're basically within the same time frame in the Marne and Oise valleys of northern France. And so here you can see a chamber cut out of the rock. There's a Neolithic axe there in the doorway, and then as you go in here, the dead are collectively laid to rest in these underground houses of the dead. This one is the most impressive of the guardians that stand at the entrance. And here you can see an image where the axe, I want to go back for a second here because they had the axe there. I'm wondering, is that there is a larger picture that's left out of this photo. But anyway, here at Courgenay, you see it with a figure with both the necklace and the axe. And here we have a figure that is very clearly female-gendered with necklace and breasts. And so we have these maternal guardians of the dead at the entranceways. Here's a photo, and I haven't been able to get a good quality photo of this mother of Razet, Hypogeum. There's another one at Razet, and this one, these are two views of the same. No, I take that back. It's not the same. It's two different ones. All right? So Ancestor-Faces, these do have mouths. They may be slightly later than the actual megalith, but what's really interesting about this photo, and I can't tell for sure, it looks like this one may also be doing that, it's a silhouette of the statue-menhirs that we've been looking at, that same basic tapered, rounded form. This one has, I think this is actually the same one. It's just that this one is deeply shadowed, but you've got that same cut shape, which may have actually been striking at the breasts that were there originally. You've got a lot of blows delivered to these really old icons, maybe in Christian times, maybe by conquerors at an earlier period. There's a lot of possibilities. But we're going to see this later on in Spain and Italy, where the shape of the statue-menhir is being referenced in either rock art or, in this case, the carved chamber walls. Okay, this is a slightly later period and still in northern France, where we are not seeing dolmens anymore, but what they call a cyst grave. And so big slabs of stone that are much thinner than the ones used in dolmens are used to hold up a capstone, and they make these above-ground chambers or semi-subterranean chambers, which in both these cases we have breasts, and this time a pair of breasts. We've got actually a duo of ancestral women, and here we've got what we saw very beginning in Bretagne, breasts with this U-shaped womb chalice, I'm going to call it. So they are there where the dead are laid, inside this chamber. You have a collective burial place. Maybe it was cremated remains, I'm not sure. And so these stand on either the walls of the cyst itself or on the entryway stones as guardians over the dead. So necklace breasts. Here we've got an entire face with a completely circular necklace, ropes of necklaces, just like we were seeing in the Languedoc forms, and then the breasts again. Here's an aerial view so you can see the shape of the cyst. The stone is out of place, got pushed out of place. And here are the entryway stones. This black one shows where the breasts and necklace were engraved, so that as you come to enter toward this shrine, you have the ancestral maternal guardian there facing you. And the same with these here on La Pierre Turquoise, Val d'Oise. And the same here again, and this is a dolmen going back up into Bretagne, where you've got again a shape of the megalithic statue-menhir, two females. So we've got this paired women, these two sisters together. And the folk tradition remembers this as the house of the fairy women, Maison des Fées. And so this is really interesting because here what we have to understand is that this is not just an archeological find that was created 5,000 years ago or somewhere in that range, and, then it was just over. It remains on the landscape. All these thousands of years, it's been on the landscape, and the people living around it continued to have traditions about it and what it represented. And, the tendency in maybe 100 years ago was to say, well, there were these ancient peoples, but they were completely conquered and destroyed, genocided out by the Indo-Europeans, the Celts, the Germanics, or whoever. It's clearer now when we do genome studies to realize that the ancestral peoples never went away. These elder kindreds were not entirely killed off. They were submerged into a population under new languages, under new social systems, but the mother lines are still there, and so that these monuments are still actually ancestral to the people living in the area even today. And so they are talking about their own ancestral dead. And when we look at the fairy face, Evans Wentz and many other scholars really showed that the fairies were not Tinkerbell. The fairies were, at least in part, understood, in great measure, in fact, as the ancestral dead. And he documents this for the Bretons, the Welsh, the Scots, the Irish, many other parts of the Celtic world, and we could extend that even further into the Germanic and other parts of Europe. Here's another example of this multitude here of ancestral women, many pairs of breasts, and they too have the U-shaped belly or womb being cut out there, and I think that's partly to indicate, they are the source, they are the life givers, they are the progenitors, There's another view of the same thing. And this monument at Playgastel also has very strong overlay of fairy faith folklore around it. So that's important because we have to understand there are both ruptures, but there are also continuities of memory and of relationship with these monuments on the landscape. All right. Sometimes there are ruptures, though, and one of those happened with Christianization. So this female statue-menhir was buried under a church. They built this church a very long time ago, and then, here they are doing reconstruction or something, and they find her. And so they put her back out into the churchyard. So she retains this connection with the ancestral dead, of which she is a representative. You can see one of her breasts was struck off. You've got a necklace. It doesn't seem to represent a face, but you have maybe a cap shown there. And there are actually two female statue-menhirs known, or should I say surviving, on the island of Guernsey between France and England. And the other one is known as La Grand-Mère du Cimetière, which is dialect for the grandmother of the cemetery. And she did, as far as I know, remain out on the landscape and was recarved by Celts in, somewhere in the early, about 2,000 years ago or so, by Latin-era Celts. And the typical style of the face really resonates with Latin faces. And I have a web page about this. I'll have to remember to post it in the course, showing the resemblance of this face. We had this in one of the earlier courses. But this necklace may or may not have been original, but the face is very definitely of Celtic type. And, of course, none of these monuments are Celtic. The Celtic migrations come far long after that, thousands of years after the Megalithic era. These are the elder kindreds, and we don't really know what language they spoke, what language family. Was it a Basque-related language or something else? All right. Still in Guernsey, there is a dolmen where this was the capstone. And so the face of this ancestor woman was looking down into the chamber, with these heavy blocks of stone walls where the dead are laid to rest. So we have ancestor face, we have breasts with little rays coming from them, which could be radiance or it could be milk flowing from her breasts, this unusual zigzaggy pattern, and then the usual belt, but they've actually added a vulva, and maybe these even represent several vulvas. I want to compare that now way at the other side of Western Europe with this icon, which is standing in a hallway, a vaginal passageway, actually, in the gigantic dolmen de Soto near Sevilla. And so here again, the ancestor face, you've got the breasts, you've got the belt, and you have a vulva which seems to be dripping blood. And there's several other icons on the stones in this passageway that have vulva symbolism on them. So that's really interesting to me, that to see that there is a symbolic framework that is so widespread in this period in Western Europe that it is shared between the Channel Islands, in the North Sea, all the way down to the Mediterranean in southern Spain. Bonu Hinu is a site in Sardinia from the 4th millennium BCE that is best known for the tremendous lot of female icons in stone, small figurines. This is a larger megalithic type. It's not a big megalith, but it's that same archetype we've been seeing with the cap that we've seen in a couple of them, the ancestor face, no mouth, necklaces, and it also has these Z symbols going around the sides of it. Sardinia has a variety of different iconic mother ancestors in different styles and shapes, and one of them is this. There are a great many of these. I thought when I first saw a photo of it that there was one of them, and it turns out that there's a whole lot of them. I can't currently find where I have them on my hard drive, but there's dozens at least in this basic shape of basically nose, breasts, and this kind of cruciform body, pillar-like body. pillar-like are the piedras marmoradas. And I haven't figured out in Sard if this means the marble stones or if it means the breasted stones. But whatever. 3 of them are breasted, and we're looking at different shots of those. They're all together here. And in the background, there are some stones which have absolutely no symbolism on them at all except for the pecked pattern that you see on these. And so those have been assumed to be male stones, but they don't really, they don't have genitals or anything else identifying them definitively as male. Here's another shot of them in this one, and a close-up. You can see the pecking pattern on them, you know, in the very tapered shape that they are. There's another group of styles in Laconi that are much more slab-like, flattened pieces of stone in very low relief, where you've got, again, the cloak over the whole back and the brow and nose, this very long nose, and breasts. I'm not sure what this one, this has a portal shape in the center of the body that we might want to compare to these. Okay, so these 2 are female, okay, with the breasts, and this one with the portal. And this one is being gendered as male with the Bronze Age weapons. And so they're dating these because of that to somewhere in the 3rd millennium, where you've got the advent of bronze weaponry coming in. And so you do have both male and female figures in this period in Sardinia. There's also what appears to be a non-gendered figure, as far as the fact neither breasts nor peen on this ancestor face, but the folk name for her is the Boulder Lady, La Donna Massa. And you've got that same hands to the belly symbolism. Here's another one, and this is not megalithic either. I haven't gotten a bead on the size of this because it was a net grab from Graziella, which I think is in the Alps. But you've got the basic form of the megalithic woman here with a pillar head, with breasts, and then you've got this variegated patterning over the lower body, maybe representing a robe. Also in the northern Alpine region of Italy, this is an amazing icon where you've got a pillar woman with that cap we keep seeing, eyes, many, many necklaces going all the way down to the waist. Little spiral here. It would be nice to have a side view of this, putting out that appeal to the universe, and then these prominent breasts. And this is the only example like this I've been able to find from northern Italy of this type. I'm going to show you some others from Arco, but later on in the show. Okay, so now we're going into southeastern Italy in Foggia. And they have all, unlike the ones some of the ones we've been looking at in France, particularly in the southern part of France, they are all female here at Foggia. And so you've got breasted figures. You'll see this looping. I'm not sure exactly what this is, decorative element, or whether it means something. The belt, and also belly buttons, which you don't see usually on these. Here's another one with that cap we've been looking at, kind of a pointed pillar head, necklace, breasts, belt. And here again, the breasts and the necklace. And so I'm really dying to get more photos of these from Foggia. Here's another sweet little one with the belly button. This looks like a 10-year-old girl to me. And here's again the loops, the belt. You can make your judgment as to whether these represent breasts or not. And then we're going to go to the opposite end of Italy, back up to the northwest, in the area between Liguria and Tuscany. And here's an example of what we saw already from France, which is a completely uncarved block of stone except for the sole symbolism of the necklace. We can compare this to the French necklaces and also to the lanula that we were seeing in Portugal. From the same region, I don't know what the dating differences on these are, but here's a very typical style for the Lunigiana region, the area I'm talking about here, where you've got figures, and these are both male and female, hands to the center of the body, and with these heads that are kind of a half-moon shape. Head here is knocked off. Okay, this is just a neck, and I'm going to give you another view of her. You can see that there are necklaces, chokers around the neck, and hands, very gentle, sweet hands to the belly or to the vulva. Here's an example of one of the ones that has the full half-moon type of head. Notice there are mouths on these. These are also Bronze Age, by the way. And the breasts struck off. Hands as well, it looks like. So defaced, deliberately defaced. You may have noticed this pattern of knocking off breasts. We've seen several examples already. All right, more from Lunigiana, and here again, two male figures with the Bronze Age type of daggers. You can't make these out of stone in that shape. And a female figure in the center. All of them with this recessed face, and this is what I'm calling the ancestor face, the mouthless brow and nose combination, but here created by cutting out stone in kind of a negative pattern to highlight the face. And so a lot of these, especially the smaller ones, are non-gendered. There's no genitals at all. Some have breasts. Others have, maybe they represent children. Here's another male one with the bronze weapon. And here's a visualization of how they might have looked originally in situ on the site before everything kind of fell apart and got knocked over and covered with soil, whatever happened to them. You can see a precinct built around them with offerings laid out. And notice that it appears that the largest of these is the female figure, then the male, and going down to smaller sizes where you've got these small, ungendered children type ones. Here's a good example of how the face is cut out from the very smooth stone. Maybe these are earrings, maybe these are ears. And I've seen faces like this in Neolithic archaeology in clay, ceramic faces from Sicily. So that's quite a ways off, but it seems to have a direct relationship. So here I'm comparing what I'm calling the ancestor face. Sometimes no eyes at all, just the brow and nose, which we see in France and Sardinia. Here's another French example. Here's one from Guernsey, the Channel Islands. Here's one from southern Spain. And here's one we're going to look at later from Germany. We saw them on these two examples that I was comparing earlier from Channel Islands and Spain. And here they are on other objects. These are both ceramics. This one from a Danish megalith. And there you've got the star eyes that we see so extensively in Iberian archaeology, the shining marks all around the eyes. This one is from the Cucuteni culture and is really not part of a megalithic complex, but I'm just showing the similarity of these faces that keep showing up. And the Folkestone drums in northern England, where you've got brow, nose, eyes. And this is all carved out of limestone. They also have these apparent shining eyes, comparing these two here, that we see in Denmark and in Spain. All right, some more examples of ancestor faces from Portugal, from France. These are rather small. And other ones from southern France. This one has very clear-cut breasts, and she seems to be holding a spoon, although that could be one of those daggers that we've seen. This one completely ungendered, unless you want to take this as being the necklaces. That's probably the same one. And here's another one with multiple necklaces. And sometimes stylistically the necklace is different. We saw exactly this type of necklace, a pendant piece of stone on a cord out of Croisade at the other end of northern France. These are in southern France. And also here, these patterns make it look like the person has baggy eyes, which may have been the intention, but it also reminds me a lot of the tattoo patterns, which are usually completely horizontal, but are curved on some of the French stones. Here's some other small examples with the ancestor face, both from Portugal, still with necklaces on both of them. And then going into Portugal, this is a really tall standing stone. It's not a statue-menhir, but you've got some symbolism going on here that seems very cosmological. This has been taken as a sun whose rays are flowing down into a cavern, and this is very vulva-esque here, but also reminiscent of our crook symbol that we were seeing quite a lot of, and then more flow coming down the stone. This is an important site because Bulhoa has this statue-menhir, and here she is again with the multiple ropes of necklaces. There are no male figures known with this iconography. Looks like just eyes. Maybe these dots represent nipples. And then you also have this interesting, almost coffin-shaped block cut into the body. Another form in Portugal, when I first saw this and I found it on the net, I was like, oh no, this is going to be a fake, because I was looking at these breasts with these really strong nipples, and I hadn't seen anything like that anywhere else. However, the head is very much in line with the style of a lot of the art. You've got the ancestor face there again. You've got the interesting use of these tree of life patterns we've seen in Neolithic and also in Paleolithic Europe. But the thing about this that really authenticated it is she was found built into a very old house. And what happened to a lot of these statue-menhirs, some of them were buried under altars in churches, and some of them were simply destroyed, and others were taken whole cloth and put into walls or into other structures. They were used as building materials. And so this is kind of a literal supersession of older spiritual patterns, and basically it survived because of that, because it was used as a building block. Here's some other forms. This is a very poor photo over here from Portugal. And you've got the necklace here very clearly. You can't really make the breast out, but I'm going to take this as a female form. And also all these little circles represent cup marks or cupules, where the people were digging out rock dust from the statue. This is a magical practice that's known all over the world. And it's something that shows up in megalithic art and rock art, and is even applied to churches and other monuments in the patriarchal era, taking blessing energy from stone. All right, now we're going to western Spain. And this is an area that a lot of people aren't very aware of. Again, a cap-like, or bangs perhaps, head. You've got the vertical nose, the dots of eyes. We've seen this over and over again from France and other places. The ropes of necklaces, the breast, and the belt. So the whole symbolic array is there. And this is a megalith. The dating on these isn't really clear. I get the impression from the literature I've read that these are slightly later than the French examples. And that may be borne out by the pattern of the headdress, which I'm going to be talking about in a moment. And I want you to notice these little round shapes at the top of this one, and we'll see it on others as well. Also, the egg-shaped face in the center, diadem above, multiple ropes of necklaces below, the face, and most of these have mouths, which may also be an indicator that they are later. Mask-like face. Here's another one. Again, breasts are struck out right from the center. Here's the drawing. Here's the photo. Okay. Hands to the center. And they're not always menhir shaped like this one. Sometimes they're actually boulders. They just took a boulder and they carved a relief into it. And so this area of Extremadura, in Cáceres, in Badajoz, in some of these provinces, they're very rich in female iconography in the rock art, but particularly, as far as I can see, all of the icons, the megalithic icons, are female in this region. And they are characterized by these elaborate headdresses. which we're going to see continuing along for thousands of years in time. And so this one, you could look at this as an outline of the entire body, and these are the legs, or you could look at it as a head and then shoulders and breasts with a necklace. I kind of tend toward that view. And this little smiling, happy face. Here's another important one from Toninuelo. And you've got, again, the diadem. These look a lot like feather headdresses, but I'm going to give you another idea about this in a moment. There again, the face with mouth, necklaces. A lot of these have stick figure type hands. There's the belt again. Ancestral mothers all over Neolithic Europe, or at least Western Europe. All right, this one's interesting because this is from a slightly later period. They're still using a block rather than a slab. We're going to see a lot of these stick figures with slabs in a minute. But I want you to look very carefully at the shape of this diadem. You see that it's kind of fatter at this end, and it tapers at this end, and it has these little compartments in it. Now compare this to a diadem that was actually found in a grave in 10th century France at a site near Orléans called La Colombine. You have the little dotted patterns across the top that we've seen. There are divisions which are created out of bronze wire, which are all wrapped around a boar's tusk. And there are these loops at the end which were used in fastening the headdress to a woman's head. This was from a female burial. This is Iron Age. This is not any more Neolithic. It's not even Bronze Age. It's quite late, in the 900s. Here's another one with the loops out of bronze wire, another boar tusk, also from a woman's grave in the same basic area around Orléans. Okay, so I want you to look at this again with this pattern of circles, spirals really, and then compare it to these. What they're basically doing is they're showing these compartments that were made with the wire. They're showing the loops. So it's really interesting because in Spain you have representations of either priestesses or I would say ancestral beings wearing these headdresses, and you only have those. You don't have the actual headdresses. In France you have no representations, but you have the headdresses. So there's this interesting way in which it's call and response in a way, archeologically, showing us the cultural pattern of female power, whether these are ancestors, deities, or priestesses. And in the case of women actually wearing the headdresses in France, then, it may have been all three, that a priestess or a shamanic woman is wearing the headdress that puts her in the form assumed by ancestral women, by ancestral mothers. Okay, so there's quite a lot of these in Spain. Here's your necklaces again. But they call them las diademadas, the diadem-wearing women. And they continue along, and you start to see them. This is a later period where they start to become much more abstract. They're not really a relief anymore. It's more of an incised pattern. But you can see in this one especially the same form of some of the older megalithic ones that we saw, the very first one I showed you from this area. And you see different variations on it here from Torrejón el Rubio. Here's another one. These are two views of the same piece. Here's another one, again with a very tall headdress. They're still retaining the belt. So in this case, you have still the shape of the megalithic stone, and including that little belt piece on it. This one is just a slab. Not a very good picture of it. Okay, a little bit of repeat there. And also they do this interesting division, which I assume is supposed to be separating shoulders from head. Here's the loops on the headdress. Same face as the old megalithic ones. And after a while, there's a transition. So in the beginning of the transition, they're still using megalithic blocks, but they're flattening it. They really smooth the surface down, and then they have a stick figure kind of petroglyph incised into it. They still retain the belt, but it's a stick figure. There's the necklace, stick arm, and the ancestor face. But this is the coming trend, is they're starting to use stone slabs. Here at La Capilla, this is characteristic of the Iron Age forms, because now we are into 10,900, somewhere in that age range, date range, BCE. So here's a very clear-cut form of the diadem with the loops at the end and the little spirals all the way around it, over her head, but it's actually encompassing the entire top half of her body. She's a stick figure. You can see her breasts here. She's wearing the necklaces, but otherwise just a stick figure. And so, let's see, maybe here's another one where the diadem encloses her, still with the breast, holding something, some object in her hands there. And here's another one where you can barely make out the diadem. It's broken, so we don't see the whole form of it. But it becomes almost like a portal that encloses this figure. And here, same thing on this one. And this one is really interesting because, again, we have the pairing of two women. There are no male figures in this assemblage of diadem figures. It's only female. And I'm going to ask you again about the sound, please. We're recording. All right, and here is, again, diadem and multiple necklaces. The entire body is covered with necklaces. This is very similar to the one we saw from Toninuelo. And I just want to compare much later in time, 1,000 years later. Okay, maybe this is interference coming from meeting burner. This is Cerro de los Santos, Iberian civilization around the 5th century, 4th century. And you see these ropes of necklaces continuing in Spanish art, at least in southeastern Spain, only now they are very strongly influenced by Phoenician cultural presence. And here's just a few more examples from various parts of Spain. And so here's one from Asturias, really not much left of the original style. This one is a photo and a drawing from Soalar it's Aragon somewhere. You've got a face, but it doesn't really show up in the photo, only in the reconstruction. You've got breasts, belt. You do have an axe or a crook and other symbols along the bottom of the body. These are even more abstract, and we could argue that these represent still the ancestral megalith, but it's not really clear at all. And you can see also that they were digging out rock dust and making cut marks on these, both of them. All right. So I'm going to I only have this one slide from Corsica because I'm tracking the female iconography, and as far as I can make out Corsica, all of the images seem to be male or non-gender. This is pretty much typical of them. And this, except for maybe this one. And I don't have a big enough photo of this to really make it out, but it looks like a breasted figure within the body of this larger megalith. And then from Arco, again, we're coming back to Arco, which we saw earlier, a woman with multiple necklaces down to her waist. Here are the male figures from Arco, and you have a single choker. They don't wear the multiple necklaces. They're wearing lots of bling. There are these beaded waistbands, or we can't really call them skirts, can we? But he is loaded up with weaponry here. He's got 6 daggers, 2 axes, 3, 4 axes, 5 axes, 6 axes across the body. So multiple weapons and wealth. So when I first found images of these Arco figures, it took me basically 40 years to track down examples that were female. This is a male form with the weapon, and here's a female form with the multiple necklaces. And so they did not show these images. I was like, well, maybe I just have to recognize the fact that they are all male in this part of the Alps, in the Western Alps. No, it's just really, really tough to get pictures of those which are gendered female. And so here from Aosta, the multiple necklaces, the belt, you can make out the hands to the center of the body. Symbolism is still going on there. And also some rich patterning. Basically, they seem to be showing cloth on a lot of these. See these woven patterns. Here's another one with the, in fact, it may be a drawing of the same one. And then here's still the same ancestor face like we were starting to see from Portugal, from France, and various other places. And here it is in Switzerland and Western Italy. Okay, PowerPoint, come on. All right. So the last thing I want to say in this part of Italy, in the Western Alps, is we have images like these which are not clearly gendered as female, but I would argue that this is a face and that this is a necklace. And that's probably also going on here. It's just been highly, highly abstracted. Because Val Camonica, Val Tadina, these areas are famous for rock art of phallic men and men farming and plowing and men with animals and different things like that. Very strongly masculine iconography, but I would say that these are the last traces of female symbolism, including maybe even this being the ancestor face again with the necklace and breasts, coming out on boulders or stelas in this Val Camonica region. And here's one example that's very strong, and you can see the date there, where, again, you have an outline that looks like a statue-menhir with the same kind of face, necklaces, breasts, and maybe vulva. They call it the idol of Velero. So this is an important connection that ties in. Really, regionally we're getting this overall constellation. I mean, so far we've covered Spain, Portugal, France, the Channel Islands, northern Italy, southern Italy. I wish I didn't have that sound here. Okay, and then maybe necklace and breast. But this is more typical of the rock art. The plowing men. One last look at Italy, and this is in the southeastern region, in the area where we had the megalithic women of Neolithic Foggia, and this area became known as Daunia, and you can see these dates are pretty much coeval with the boar headdresses that we saw out of Orléans area in France, but very strongly dressed slabs, very flat stone slabs. And you have both male and female figures, but I'm concentrating here on women. So you still have the necklaces, the hands to the center of the body. This may be a comb used, a weaver's baton, or weaver's comb, I'm not sure of the correct term. And there's a lot of scenes on these megaliths. And they include scenes of processions, musical instruments. That might be a lyre, although some suggest it might be a weaving. Male figures are with weapons, but the women's images not only have the necklaces and the usual stuff we've been seeing, but also small scenes of women sitting at a vertical loom. And these, you can see two examples of that on both of these. These are from, this is the front and this is the back of the same stela. Another one here with processions, and maybe this is a person with a lyre. But you see it turning up a lot, and I'm not recalling real closely about this, but I seem to remember a suggestion that these might have been pictured as being weavings. Okay, now I'm going to just do a few traces moving out of Western Europe. The Elbe River has a very old cultural layer where these are so rare to see these actually published, and it took me a very long time to track them down. Here's a statue-menhir. You've got your belt, you've got your necklace of a type that we've already seen in Portugal, and you just have the eyes. This is apparently part of the funnel beaker culture. And here's another photo, the one we just saw. Here's a different one. I have not been able to get photo of more than one of these. So these are really buried. And in this shape here looks like it's just part of the stone. They didn't really bother flattening it all the way down. But this is a different aspect of funnel beaker culture that I have not ever seen discussed anywhere. And it's just almost like the most fortuitous luck just to find them, give you a picture of them. But they clearly accord with the necklaced female figures we've seen in the rest of Europe. Here's the Hochberg figure, which was part of a larger stone circle. And again, with the necklace, I'm going to call that a female figure, Ancestor-Face. And this is later, very small stellite inscribed with various symbols in Bavaria. And another stone slab where you've got a ceremonial scene, man with a lure, I'm going to guess, and two women in invocational postures. Here's one last thing from, this is now southeastern Europe, in the northern part of Greece. And we've got this same basic archetype with the necklaces, breasts, belt, and legs, kind of a triangular head. This is, the only example that I've really been able to locate out of Greece. And, the history of how this came to be there is puzzling. Is it a Neolithic period figure? I don't even know if it falls into that date span. Interesting outlier, as so is this from the Ukraine. And most of the Ukrainian slabs, statue-menhirs that I've seen, have been male, but here's a female one with that same kind of sunken head. And look at how similar the face is to the sunken faces that we were seeing in the Lunigiana culture in Italy. All right, one more example, and this, as far as I know, is from the Neolithic. You've got a vulva here. Most of these are very heavily weaponed male figures, which you'll see an example of in a second. But it's kind of interesting to see traces of this popping up in parts of Eastern Europe. Otherwise, it's very much of a Western European pattern. And yet, this is really quite old. Sredny Stog is a Proto-Indo-European culture in Ukraine, and that really shows up here with, you've got this male figure with battle scenes and weapons all over him in a phallus. Well, here's another couple examples. This you can barely make out what's going on at all, except for the bow and arrow. But here's another female form out of Ukraine. So I'm going to wrap up with this section, which these are quite a bit later than everything we've seen so far. They're about 1,000 years old. Russians refer to them as the Kamennye Babi, the stone old women. And here they've all been gathered together into a museum. But originally they were out on the steppe, Ukrainian steppe, and they were created by the Kipchak Tartars, and these characteristic headdresses were part of the process of identifying them historically. But you've got these amazing large statues in stone, predominantly female from what I can see. There are some male figures, ear and earring, and mature women, clearly, whose hands are to the center of their body, the lower body. Here's a front view of one of them. There's your necklaces again. But many of them hold a chalice over the area of their womb. And here's again the Kipchak headdress, women's headdress. So like the old Neolithic French monuments, these would have been out on the landscape. They weren't associated with burials, as far as I know. Here's an example of one that's male, at least as far as the mustache is concerned. But you look at the shape of the rest of the body, particularly the hips, and it really seems prototypically female. And you have to ask why men are wearing the Brunhilde breastplates like that. Maybe this one had a sex change as well. A really beautiful example of the high-peaked Turkic women's headdress there. And this one in Russian was known folklorically as the Scythian old woman. And so here's just another photo showing how many of these there are. And they did not even succeed in gathering them all in. Now, these statue-menhirs, predominantly female, stretch not only from the Ukraine, but even as far east as Bulgaria, all the way across the Central Asian steppe, through Mongolia, and there have even been some examples found in Korea and Japan. So that's quite a reach. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. As you can see, there's just this massive archaeological pattern that hardly any of us have ever been shown, if any. You know, this is something that is really important history, and somebody's trying to call me. I hope you can you still hear me? Let me see here. Right. Sending a message here. Okay, I'm going to continue this if you can hear, because I am recording this, but audio problems. Okay, good. So anyway, I'm ready for questions and comments, and I saw that there was one here already, so let me just look it up again for a second. Slide 67 is so familiar to figures from the Cyclades. Would you comment and discuss dates? Are they? Okay, let's go back to slide 67. Okay, there it is. Yes, it is very similar to the Cycladic ones. I don't know where I stashed. I have a whole collection of these Sardinian images, and they're probably in one of my website folders that I can't locate. But yeah, the flatness, they're carved out of marble like the Cycladic figures. And you know, one of the things is there was a lot of traveling going around the Mediterranean in this period, in the 4th millennium BCE. And so that's very clear. And you can see also similarities if the figurines, which I did not show you, from Bono Igenu and some of the other Sardinian sites. There's an archetype of women shown not with really big breasts, but with breasts and with a rigid belly fat that is set off against the vulvic triangle just below it. That is seen in the Cycladic figurines, especially the old ones, the really old ones, like 4500 BCE, and it is also found in Syrian art at sites like Tel Sabi Abyad. So there's something going on there in that Neolithic period. There was a style that was seen and shared and picked up between countries that were like vastly separated, thousands of miles apart in distance from each other. Okay, anybody else got a question? And while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to just say to the web audience that I hope you'll visit the Suppress Histories site on Facebook, where there's a lot more of this kind of stuff. Okay, question about the cupules. What was rock dust used for from the stele? Yeah, see, that's a very large question. I am quite sure that it was used as a sacred substance that was infused with vital power from the rock, and also from being an icon of the divine female. And there are attestations of it being used in conception ceremonies, that, you know, what they call baby rocks in Pomo country. Scraping out that rock dust was used ceremonially in a variety of ways. There's also talk about it being used in rain ceremonies. It could have been used in healing the sick. There's a lot of different possibilities. I hope I didn't lose too many people by being so late. I'm sorry again about zoning this out, and you have Nava to thank for me not completely blowing it. I guess trying to do a 12:30 p.m. webcast is just asking Morning Girl too much out of Morning Girls. Okay, I'm going to close up the webcast, and so thank you all for